The signal came through during the night shift. Was running diagnostics on the engine when her screen lit up with incoming data. She frowned at first, thinking it was interference from the nearby nebula. But then she heard the voice. It was broken and desperate. The translation software struggled to keep up with the alien words, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone was dying. Someone was begging for help. Ran to the bridge, her boots echoing through the empty corridor. The scout ship was small, only 40 crew members, and most of them were asleep. Captain Minu was reviewing star charts when she burst in. "Captain, we have a distress signal," she said, pulling up the data on the main screen. Minu straightened in his chair. He was a quiet man, the kind who thought before speaking. His dark eyes scanned the information quickly. "How far?" 3 weeks at current speed," replied. "It's repeating. They're asking for military aid." The message played again. This time the translation was clearer. "Please, anyone who can hear this. They're killing billions. Our cities are burning. We have children here. We have families. Please help us." Minu's jaw tightened. He pressed the comm button. "Navigator, report to the bridge now." Arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. He was young, barely 25, with bright eyes that still held wonder when he looked at the stars. He listened to the message twice, his face growing pale. "Check our position against known space territories," Minu ordered. His fingers flew across his console. "We're in neutral space, Captain. The signal is coming from the Republic. They're a peaceful federation, mostly herbivore species, low-gravity worlds." He paused, swallowing hard. "The nearest major power is the Eth Empire, but they're 5 weeks away. The Concordat is even further." "And us?" Minu asked. 3 weeks, sir. We're the closest ship." Watched the captain carefully. She had served under him for 2 years and knew what he was thinking. There was a mapping vessel, not a warship. They had weapons, but only for defense against pirates. They had no authorization to make first contact with alien species, let alone involve themselves in a war. But the message kept playing. In the background they could hear screams. "What's attacking them?" Minu asked. Pulled up what little data they had. "Unknown species. The automated beacons are calling them the Shriek Swarm. Possibly they've already destroyed 4 colony worlds." Minu stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, children were dying while waiting for help that might never come. "Regulations say we need to report this to Earth Command and wait for orders," said quietly. "That would take 6 weeks minimum," added. "By then." She didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen by then. Minu turned to face his crew. "Wake everyone. I want a full briefing in 30 minutes. Engineering, check our weapons systems. Navigation, plot the fastest course to space." His eyes widened. "Sir, we're not authorized." "I know what we're authorized to do," Minu interrupted, but his voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "I also know what's right. Send a message back to Earth Command, tell them what we found and what we're doing, but we're not waiting for permission." Within the hour, the entire crew had assembled in the mess hall. Minu explained the situation clearly and honestly. They were a scout ship. They had 40 people against an enemy that had killed billions. The odds were terrible. Anyone who wanted to object could do so without consequences. Nobody objected. Their combat specialist was already running drills in his mind. He was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, a stocky man with scars on his knuckles and a steady voice. "How many Marines do we have?" 30, counting support personnel, Minu replied. "It'll have to be enough," said. The ship's medic raised her hand. She was small and soft-spoken, the kind of person who apologized to plants when she brushed against them. "What if we make things worse? What if we're not strong enough to help?" It was a fair question, the kind of question that deserved an honest answer. Minu looked at each of his crew members. "We might not be strong enough. We might fail. but I'd rather die trying to save someone than live knowing I heard them screaming and did nothing." The room fell silent. Spoke up, his voice steadier now. "The don't know we exist. They've never met humans before. We'll be making first contact in the middle of a war zone." "Then we better make a good impression," said with a grim smile. The changed course, its engines burning bright as it accelerated toward space. Behind them, Earth grew smaller. Ahead of them, billions of lives hung in the balance. In the engineering bay, checked the weapon systems 3 times. They had missile pods and enough ammunition for maybe 2 serious engagements. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. On the bridge, calculated trajectory after trajectory, looking for any way to shave hours off their travel time. Every hour mattered. Every minute was lives lost. In his quarters, Minu recorded a message for his sister back on Earth, just in case. He told her he loved her. He told her he was doing the right thing. He hoped she would understand. 3 weeks felt like an eternity. The crew trained. They prepared. They listened to the distress signal growing stronger and more desperate with each passing day. And when they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of space, they saw the fires burning on the planets below. The planet 9 filled and it was dying. Smoke covered half the continents. Even from orbit, they could see the massive shapes moving across the surface like a living carpet. The shrieks swarm. "Get me whoever's in charge down there," Minu ordered. It took several attempts before they established contact. The voice that came through was high-pitched and trembling. The translator identified the speaker as a defense coordinator for the Republic. "Unknown vessel, please identify yourself. Are you from the Eth Empire, the Concordat?" "Negative," Minu replied. "We're from Earth. We received your distress signal. Where do you need us?" There was a long pause. "Earth. We have no record of Earth in our database. What species are you?" "Human, and we don't have time for introductions. Where are your people most at risk?" Another pause. Minu could hear chaos in the background. Alarms, screaming. Something that sounded like weapons fire. "The capital city," finally said. 3 million civilians are trapped. The shriek broke through our defenses an hour ago. We're trying to evacuate, but there's no time. There's no time. Was already pulling up scans of the capital. The city was massive, built in a spiral pattern around a central tower. The shriek were pouring in from the eastern sector, moving fast. "Tell your people to shelter in place," Minu said. "We're coming down." "You can't," his voice rose in panic. "The atmospheric entry alone will kill you. The heat, the pressure, your ship will." "We'll be fine," Minu interrupted. He switched to ship-wide comm. "All hands prepare for combat drop. Get your Marines ready. We're going in hot." The pitched forward, diving toward the planet. The hull began to glow red as they hit the atmosphere at a speed that made the sensors scream warnings. On the planet's surface, watched in horror as the unknown ship plunged toward the surface like a meteor. In the drop bay was strapping 30 Marines into their suits. The suits were bulky, designed for heavy combat in environments that would kill unprotected humans. Each Marine carried enough firepower to level a building. "Remember your training," said, his voice calm over the squad channel. "These things are bugs, big bugs, but still bugs. Aim for the joints. Watch your corners and don't die. I hate paperwork." A few nervous laughs echoed through the bay. Was checking medical supplies, her hands moving automatically even though her mind was racing. She had never been in real combat before. Training simulations didn't prepare you for the smell, the sounds, the reality of people dying. They landed hard in the city's central plaza, crushing a fountain that had stood for 300 years. The landing ramp dropped, and Marines poured out into hell. The shriek were everywhere. They looked like a nightmare combination of mantis and spider, each one the size of a small car. Their mandibles clicked and screeched as they tore through buildings, hunting for the hiding inside. The first shriek to notice the humans died before it could sound an alarm. Rounds tore through its carapace and it collapsed in a spray of yellow fluid. Then another fell, and another. The Marines moved through the city in tight formation, using hand signals and practiced maneuvers. When they encountered groups of shriek, they didn't hesitate. Grenades flew into clusters of enemies. Automatic weapons chewed through chitin and flesh. Though watching from their hiding spots, couldn't believe what they were seeing. These newcomers fought with a brutality that seemed impossible. They ran toward danger instead of away from it. When one Marine was injured, the others covered him without breaking formation. Tail Eyes, a young teacher, watched through a window as a human soldier took a hit that punched through his armor. The human staggered, fell to one knee, then stood back up and kept fighting. He was screaming something in his own language, something that the translator couldn't process because it was just raw fury. That soldier was. The hit had cracked 2 ribs, but the combat stimulants in his suit were already flooding his system with painkillers and adrenaline. He could feel the damage, knew he should fall back, but there were civilians behind him and enemies in front. The choice was easy. "Push forward," he shouted. "Secure the residential district. Set up a triage station in what had been a school." Wounded were brought to her, terrified and in shock. They were so fragile compared to humans, with thin bones and delicate skin. An injury that would be minor for a human was life-threatening for them. She worked quickly, efficiently, her training overriding her fear. But when a child was brought in, burned and crying for her mother, had to stop and breathe. Tears ran down her face as she worked, but her hands never shook. A medic named watched in amazement. "You're crying," she said, "but you still work. How?" "Because crying doesn't save lives," replied, her voice thick. "Working does." The battle raged for 16 hours. The Marines established a safe corridor from the residential districts to the evacuation points. The weapons provided covering fire from above, hammering shriek concentrations with precision strikes. Slowly, painfully, the civilians were moved to safety. 2.8 million were evacuated. Not all of them made it. The bodies of 200,000 lay in the streets, and that number would haunt Minyu for the rest of his life. When the last transport lifted off, Marines fell back to the. 3 of them had died. 12 more were wounded. Himself was barely standing, held up by stimulants and pure stubbornness. On the command ship in orbit stared at the reports. One small ship, 40 crew members. They had achieved what an entire battle fleet couldn't. Tail Eyes, who had been evacuated with the other civilians, looked out at the stars and whispered a question that many were asking. What kind of world creates warriors like that? Nobody had an answer, not yet. The flagship Harmony's promise was beautiful in the way most peaceful species ships were beautiful. Smooth curves, white panels, observation decks designed for contemplation rather than combat. It made the look like exactly what it was, a blunt instrument designed to survive in a hostile universe. Minyu and his senior crew took a shuttle to the flagship for the emergency council meeting. He brought, and their intelligence officer. Moved stiffly, his ribs still healing, but he refused to stay behind. They were waiting in their council chamber. Elder stood at the center, a tall being with 4 arms and soft gray fur. Around him sat the other council members, all watching the humans with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Please sit," said, gesturing to chairs that had been hastily modified for human physiology. The humans sat. The chairs were still too small, too delicate. Everything in this room was delicate. It made Minyu feel like a bull in a glass shop. "We owe you our lives," began. 3 million souls saved because you answered our call. We are grateful beyond words." "You're welcome," Minyu said simply. His large eyes blinked slowly. "But we must ask, what are you? Your ship moved through our atmosphere at speeds that should have torn it apart. Your soldiers fought with injuries that would kill any of us. And your medic," he looked at. She cried while saving our children, yet she never stopped working. Shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. Leaned forward. We're from a planet called Earth. It's a Class 12. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. One of the council members stood abruptly, knocking over their chair. Impossible. Class 12 worlds are quarantined. Nothing intelligent can evolve there. And yet here we are, said quietly. Raised one hand for silence. Please explain, we need to understand. Pulled up a hologram of Earth. The beautiful blue and green sphere rotated slowly above the table. Our planet has one standard gravity. That's about 3 times what you experience here. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which you would consider toxic. We evolved alongside predators that could run faster than your ships can fly. She changed the image to show a lion chasing prey across a savanna. The recoiled. Our bodies are built to survive trauma, continued. Dense bones, redundant organs, a healing factor that lets us survive wounds that would kill most species. We sweat to cool ourselves, which means we can run for hours without stopping. We call it persistence hunting. Madness, one council member whispered. Our planet tried to kill us in every way possible, added. Diseases, predators, other humans. We had wars that lasted decades, weapons that could destroy entire cities. We almost wiped ourselves out 3 separate times before we finally learned to work together. The council was silent, processing this information. Spoke up, his voice rough. You asked what kind of world makes warriors like us. The answer is, a world that doesn't give you a choice. On Earth, you adapt or you die. We adapted. Who had been quiet until now pulled up tactical displays. I've been analyzing the shriek behavior patterns. They're avoiding sectors where we fought, that has encountered before and learned to fear them. That's impossible, said from his position at the council table. The shriek fear nothing. They've consumed 14 civilizations. They fear us, replied flatly, because we're the kind of crazy that fights back even when we should be dead. Stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the damaged planet below. We are a peaceful people. We solved our conflicts through dialogue and reason thousands of years ago. We thought that was civilization. It is, said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. She rarely spoke in meetings. What you have is beautiful. A society without violence, without war. That's what every human dreams of. Then why do you still carry weapons? Asked. Because the universe doesn't care about dreams, Minyu answered. You can be as civilized as you want, but that won't stop someone less civilized from taking everything you have. We learned that the hard way. Turned to face them. Can you teach us to fight like you? Shook his head. You're not built for it. Your bones would break under the strain. Your reflexes are too slow. You'd die before you could land a hit. Then what do we do? His voice cracked with desperation. The shriek won't stop. They'll keep coming until we're extinct. Minyu stood. You let us fight for you, but you need to understand what that means. We don't fight clean. We use tactics that you'll find horrifying. We'll do things that go against everything you believe in. Like what? Like targeting their hive queens. Like using biological weapons if we have to. Like accepting casualties because sometimes you can't save everyone. Minyu's voice was hard. War isn't noble. It's not fair. It's ugly and brutal, and it leaves scars that never heal. But if you want to survive, you need warriors who understand that. The council chamber fell silent again. They looked at each other, communicating in ways the humans couldn't understand. Finally spoke. We called for allies. We hoped the Eth would come with their advanced technology. We hoped they would bring their ancient wisdom. Instead, you came. And you saved us when no one else would. He walked to Minyu and placed both right hands on the captain's shoulders. It was a gesture of deep respect in culture. Do what you must, we trust you. Minyu felt the weight of those words. Trust from people who had no reason to trust anyone, least of all a species they just met. a species that scared them. "We won't let you down," he promised. As the meeting ended and the humans prepared to return to their ship, Talais approached. The young teacher had been observing from the back of the room. "Is it true," Talais asked, "that you almost destroyed yourselves?" Nodded 3 times. "Nuclear war, biological weapons, climate collapse, we came so close." "But you didn't, you survived, how?" Smiled sadly. "Because some of us chose to build instead of destroy. Some of us chose to heal instead of hurt. That's the thing about. We can be the worst thing the universe ever created or the best. The choice is ours." Talais watched the humans board their shuttle. Warriors who cried, killers who saved lives, who chose to be heroes. Maybe, Talais thought, there was hope after all. The plan was insane. Even by human standards, it was insane. But as Minyu explained it to the council, no one could offer a better alternative. The Shriek operate like Earth insects. They're organized around queen minds that control the entire swarm through pheromones and psychic signals. This said as he displayed scans of the moon orbiting 9. "We've located their primary hive nest here. If we eliminate the queen mind, the swarm will fragment and scatter." "The moon is crawling with millions of Shriek warriors," protested. "It would take a fleet to fight through them." "Which is why we're not fighting through them," Minyu replied. "We're going to sneak in, plant seismic charges, and collapse the hive from within." Sfer rippled with distress. "You're talking about triggering a moonquake. The structural damage alone could destabilize the moon's orbit." "Better a destabilized moon than no left to worry about it," said bluntly. The council approved the mission, though Minyu could see the horror in their eyes. This was what they had signed up for, the ugly reality of survival. Minyu called for volunteers. Every single crew member of the stepped forward. He had to turn most of them away. They could only take 20 people maximum. Any more and they'd never make it past Shriek sensors. The team included best Marines for technical support, for navigation, for medical, and to identify the Queen Mind. Minyu would lead personally. To everyone's surprise, Talais volunteered as well. "You're a teacher, not a soldier," said. "I am," Talais replied firmly. "This is my fight too, and you need someone who understands Shriek biology from our research. I studied them before they attacked." Minyu considered. "Can you handle seeing combat? Can you handle me slowing you down if I stay behind and you miss something important?" Talais countered. Minyu smiled slightly. "You'll do." The provided stealth technology, cloaking fields designed for their scout ships. Spent 2 days adapting them to work with human suits. It was barely functional. The power drain was enormous, but it would give them maybe 30 minutes of invisibility. They launched at night, using a shuttle modified with human engines. The combination made for a rough ride, but it got them to the moon undetected. The hive entrance was a massive tunnel bored into the moon's surface, wide enough to fly a ship through. They landed half a kilometer away and proceeded on foot. The moon had almost no gravity, making movement strange and difficult. The Marines adapted quickly, using their suit thrusters to stay grounded. Talais struggled at first but learned fast. They entered the tunnel, cloaking fields active. Inside, the walls were covered in some kind of organic resin that pulsed with a sickly bioluminescence. The air, such as it was, smelled like rotting meat. Shriek workers passed within meters of them, mandibles clicking as they carried biomass deeper into the hive. Each time one came close, the team froze. The cloaking fields worked, but they weren't perfect. One wrong move, one noise, and the entire hive would know they were there. 3 hours into the infiltration, they found the first evidence of the Shriek's victims. A chamber filled with the remains of previous civilizations. Bones from a dozen different species, arranged in careful patterns. The Shriek kept trophies. Had to stop and breathe slowly to keep from being sick. Put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. They planted the first seismic charge in a load-bearing cavern, handled the technical work, her hands steady despite the Shriek workers moving overhead. The charge was designed to create a resonance wave that would spread through the moon's crust, triggering a cascade effect. 6 more charges to go. In the fourth chamber, they ran into Shriek warriors, not workers but soldiers, bigger, faster, with mandibles that could cut through steel. The team's cloaking fields flickered under the strain of sudden movement. Made a split-second decision. Break cloak, weapons free. The chamber erupted in violence, roared in the low gravity, sending Shriek warriors tumbling. The Marines formed a defensive circle, covering each other as they fought. Talai saw a warrior charging toward who was focused on fighting another enemy. Without thinking, the teacher grabbed a fallen Marine's sidearm and fired. The shot went wide, but it distracted the warrior long enough for it to turn and finish it. Thanks, gasped. Don't mention it, Talai replied, surprised by his own actions. They fought their way deeper into the hive. The Shriek now knew they were there and the entire nest was mobilizing, but they were committed. There was no turning back. Planted charges as they moved, working faster now. Speed was their only advantage. Led them toward the Queen's chamber using pheromone traces. They found her in the heart of the moon. The Queen mind was massive, bloated, pulsating. She was surrounded by hundreds of warrior Shriek, but she couldn't move. All her energy went into producing eggs and coordinating the swarm. Plant the last charge directly beneath her, Minyu ordered. Ran forward, dodging between warriors. A mandible caught her leg, tearing through the suit. She stumbled but kept going. Covered her, firing a rifle with accuracy that surprised everyone. The charge was set. They had 30 seconds to get clear before the detonation sequence began. Move, 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 shouted. They ran through collapsing tunnels, Shriek warriors pursuing them. Took a hit that punched through his armor and into his chest. He went down hard. Talai doubled back, grabbed the human navigator and threw him over his shoulder. In the low gravity, even could carry a human. I've got him. The charges began detonating. The moon shook. Tunnels collapsed. The team barely made it to the entrance before the entire hive came down. They stumbled out into open space, battered and bleeding. Behind them, the moon's surface was fracturing. Massive cracks spread across the terrain as the seismic waves did their work. Immediately went to, the wound was bad, life-threatening. She worked frantically, her medical training taking over. Minyu held the detonator for the final charge, the one they'd planted directly under the Queen. He looked at his team. 7 of them had made it out. 13 were still inside, cut off when the tunnels collapsed. Sir said quietly, we need to go now. Minyu pressed the detonator. The explosion was visible from 9. The moon's interior lit up like a miniature sun as the Queen Mind and her entire chamber were vaporized. In orbit, sensors registered the Shriek swarm's communications going haywire. Without the Queen Mind to coordinate them, the individual warriors were lost, confused, fighting each other. The team made it back to the was in critical condition, but quick work had kept him alive. Barely. In the shuttle, Talai looked at his hands. They were covered in human blood and Shriek ichor. He had killed today. He had saved lives today. He didn't know which feeling was stronger. Minyu sat in the pilot's seat, staring at nothing. 13 crew members were gone. 13 people who trusted him. 13 families back on Earth who would get the worst news possible. But 3 million were alive because of what they did. He didn't know if that math worked out. He suspected it never would. 6 months had passed since the moon fell silent. The Shriek swarm, leaderless and confused, had scattered to the edges of space. Some died fighting each other. Some simply drifted away into the dark. The threat was over. Had survived, though he would carry the scars for the rest of his life. He stood in the newly rebuilt capital of 9, wearing formal diplomatic robes that felt strange after months in a military uniform. Around him, thousands have gathered for the memorial ceremony. The monument was simple but powerful. 13 pillars of white stone, each carved with the name of a human who died in the moon assault. At the base, script read, "They came from far away, from a world we did not know, and gave everything so we could live." Elder stood before the crowd, his voice amplified across the plaza. "We prayed for allies. We expected the great powers of the galaxy to answer. Instead, these humans came. Warriors from a planet that should have killed them before they could even dream of the stars." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They terrified us. Their violence, their capacity for destruction, their willingness to accept casualties. Everything about them went against what we believed civilization should be." Turned to look at the human crew members standing at attention. Minyu, survivors of a battle that would be remembered forever. But we were wrong about what civilization means. It is not the absence of violence. It is the choice to use violence only to protect others. These humans showed us that. They cried when they killed. They mourned every loss. But they never stopped fighting because they knew we could not fight for ourselves. The crowd was silent. Many were crying. They had lost so much, but they had also gained something they never expected. Friends who came from hell and chose to be heroes. The memorial ceremony ended with a traditional song of remembrance. The humans didn't understand the words, but they understood the meaning. Loss, gratitude, hope. After the ceremony, the work continued. Had stayed on 9, helping rebuild the infrastructure. She worked alongside engineers, teaching them human methods of construction. Buildings that could withstand earthquakes. Power systems with redundant backups. Simple ideas that could save lives in future disasters. "You build everything like you expect it to fail," one engineer named remarked. "Because everything eventually does fail," replied. "The trick is making sure people survive when it happens." Had established the first cross-species medical exchange program. Doctors learned human emergency medicine. Human medics learned surgical techniques. The combination was saving lives across the Republic. She spent her evenings in the children's hospital, reading stories to young who had lost their families in the war. The kids loved her, climbing onto her lap and asking about Earth. She told them about oceans and mountains, about animals that would seem like monsters to them, about a world that was beautiful despite being deadly. One little girl named asked, "Is it true that humans hug when they're sad?" "Yes," said smiling. "Can you show me?" Pulled the child into a gentle embrace. His whole body fit against his chest, small and fragile. The girl started crying, finally letting out grief she'd been holding for months. Held her and let her cry because sometimes that was the best medicine. Was doing something he never expected, training volunteers in defensive combat. Not to make them warriors like humans, but to give them tools to protect themselves. How to move during an attack, where to strike if something grabbed you. Basic situational awareness. Most couldn't handle it. The violence was too much for their peaceful minds. But a few, like Talai's, surprised everyone. The teacher had discovered something in himself during the moon assault. Not a love of violence, but an understanding that sometimes protection required force. "You're a natural," told him after a particularly good training session. "No," Talai said, breathing hard. "I hate this, every second of it, but I love my students more than I hate fighting. If that means learning to be dangerous, then I'll learn." Respected that answer. Had made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing shriek communication patterns, she detected a signal from deep space. Another distress call, another civilization under attack. She brought the information to Minyu, who was preparing to return to Earth. The had been officially reassigned as humanity's first diplomatic vessel, and Minyu was now Captain Ambassador, though he hated the title. It's 3 months away, said, showing him the trajectory. The signal is weak, but it's definitely asking for help. Minyu studied the data. Another war, more dying, more chances to lose people he cared about. What do you think? He asked. Shrugged, I think someone needs help. He found the rest of his senior crew in the mess hall. They were sharing a meal with friends, a tradition that had developed over the months. Human food was too spicy and food was too bland for humans, but they ate together anyway. Minyu laid out the situation. Another distress call, another civilization in trouble, another choice. We should tell Earth Command, said. He was still recovering, but his mind was sharp as ever. They can send a proper fleet. By the time a fleet gets there, everyone might be dead, countered. Then we go, said simply, same as before. We lost 13 people last time, Minyu reminded them. We might lose more this time. Spoke up. My mother used to say that the purpose of a strong person is to help the weak, not because we'll always win, but because trying is better than doing nothing. The crew voted. It was unanimous. They would answer the call. The next day they prepared for departure. Came to see them off, filling the spaceport. Tail Eyes was there, now wearing the insignia of a defense instructor. Brought a gift, a shield generator designed with human durability in mind, and her friends from the hospital sang a goodbye song they'd written themselves. Elder presented Minyu with a containing formal first contact protocols from the Galactic Assembly. Humanity had been officially recognized as a spacefaring civilization. Earth would receive a delegation within the year. They're embarrassed, explained. All the great powers. They ignored our call because they were calculating risks and benefits. You just came. You didn't ask for payment, didn't demand territory, you just helped. That's what neighbors do, Minyu said. The galaxy is learning that can be neighbors, replied. You're changing how everyone thinks about civilization. The lifted off, engines burning bright against the blue sky. The watched until it was just a star among stars. On the bridge, Minyu punched in the coordinates for the new distress signal. The crew was ready. Scared, tired, haunted by the friends they'd lost, but ready. Navigation set course, Minyu ordered. Course laid in, confirmed. Engineering status. All systems green, reported. We're good to go. Medical. Ready for whatever comes, said. Minyu took a breath. Somewhere out there, people were dying while waiting for help, and that was 3 months away. Take us out full speed. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving space behind. They didn't know what they would find. They didn't know if they would survive, but they knew they couldn't ignore a cry for help. Because that's what did. They survived the impossible. They fought when others couldn't. They chose to be heroes even when being monsters would be easier. Far behind them, stood at the memorial and placed his hands on the stone pillars. They prayed for allies, he whispered. Instead, they received guardians born from a world that teaches its children to survive the impossible. And somewhere in the dark between stars, those guardians were already racing toward the next fight, the next rescue, the next impossible mission. They were human, and they would answer the call.